Yeah, Loot. Yeah, so
Loot?
it's savewithloot.com. Yeah, and we're the easiest way for you to save money when you're buying software online.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been, working with Loot for a little while now, and really have seen the ability of the platform to help you save on SaaS. And, truly it's great. And if you're building with no code tools, you definitely want to check them out. We have a bunch of no code deals on our page on the discounts tab of our website, but you can also go directly to Loot's website and check out a lot more deals there. But I'll pass it over to Dexter and he can talk about Loot and everything you can do with it.
Yeah. I just wanted to, I'm definitely going to dive in and talk a little bit about Loot, but I wanted to set the stage a little bit. My name's Dexter. I'm VP of Growth at Loot. Prior to coming to Loot, I was actually Director of Partnerships at Honey for a number of years, which was then acquired by PayPal. So it was a really exciting experience, really fun. One of the things I figured out through my time at Honey, close to 4 years, was, I'm really passionate about helping people save money. And I've noticed this in my regular life growing up. I always was looking for a deal. I was always looking for a discount. I was always looking for different ways to save. And I think it's something that I'm really passionate about. I think like what we did with Honey was we realized that, there's a lot of like disparate deals, coupons, cashback you could get when you were shopping online. And when our founder, Sean, came to me and talked more about Loot, and our mission, which our mission is to help startups save money on SaaS, it made me realize, you know what, there's a similar opportunity here where there's a lot of disparate discounts. There's different ways that you can save money on SaaS, but it's really hard to know about it. And so at Loot, we've built a deal directory and a browser extension that help you automatically find the lowest price on the SaaS tools that you're looking at. And actually, for the people that are on this webinar and for people that even get this recording, we'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card for your first SaaS purchase with Loot. So if you actually go to www.savewithloot.com/no-code-devs, you'll actually see there we've got a great partnership with No Code Devs. And if you sign up through there, we'll know it's you, and we'll be able to give you that $50 Amazon gift card when you make your first SaaS purchase using Loot. So what am I going to talk about today? So just real quick, I wanted to lay out, how to thrive in the post-COVID startup environment. Like a lot of things have changed. I just want to talk a little bit about that. And then how to save building your startup. So now that we're in this post-COVID environment, how do you save money where you can when you're building your startup, whether it be obviously using lots of no-code tools? That's a great way to save, right? But there's a lot of other ways that you can save that maybe aren't as obvious, just based on the environment that we're currently living in. And then I want to talk a little bit about how using Loot can really supercharge your savings and help you save even more money. Okay, so I wanted to start out just by the way to think about this, right? So whenever you're about to do something, like if you're about to start a business or you're about to plan a new product launch, you really want to size up the current terrain, right? And I think that's something that some people miss. I think there are definitely certain businesses that can thrive under any sort of environment, but there are a lot of cases where, maybe the business that you're building or that the way that you're building a business needs to change based on the terrain, and you really need to plan your approach. So I like this picture here of Tiger just sizing up his shot, right? Like you never really see golfers, like very rarely, maybe Happy Gilmore. I don't know if there's any other golfers that do this, but just walking right up to the ball and hitting it, right? They always, especially when they're putting or they've got a tough chip, they take quite a bit of time to really look and assess at what's ahead of them, what's in front of them, and to make sure that the type of shot that they're hitting is relevant to the terrain that they're playing in. And I think the same can be said about how you're building your business, right? You really want to be looking at the terrain and understand like the situation that you're in. So let's talk about the current business terrain. We are in the post-COVID startup environment, and with that comes like quite a few different things, right? So how has the game changed? And, Art, feel free to jump in here as well if you have any thoughts on this stuff. And I think we'll probably have like just an open conversation about this afterwards. I really wanted to kind of use this as a way to set the table. Okay, so how has the game changed, right? Like since COVID, we really are in a remote first environment. And I still think, and I say this all the time when I'm in conversations with people, but that we fail to recognize how significant of a change this actually is. Over here on the right, like I just have a quick chart that I posted it's from The Economist actually, of that shift, right? That line right there, that's when COVID hit. And you can see that instant, basically inverse relationship, right? Like before the pandemic, there was an accelerating trend of people working remotely. It was definitely something that was moving up. But then post-pandemic, it basically catapulted and flipped, right? whereas maybe 25, 30% of people pre-pandemic were working remote and 70% were on site, it flipped the other way around. At least as of the last time this chart was updated, which was late 2022, or sorry, early 2022, 77% of the workforce is remote. And even though that's changing, right? Like I think a lot of companies are wanting people to come into the office more. There's still at least a partial remote element, right? So whereas they may have been 5 days a week in the office, now maybe they're doing 2 or 3 days a week at home or in the office, right? So it's more of a hybrid. In this world that we were in pre-COVID, where especially in the tech world where a lot of people are doing things digitally, a majority of people were still working in the office. I really think that those days have changed. And you need to think about what this means for businesses, right? So if we are in a remote first environment, what sorts of tools are going to be in demand, right? I think thinking about the workplace and what's missing in a 100% remote environment is like things like collaboration or knowledge sharing, right? So we're seeing a lot of tools come onto the scene that are really focused around solving these problems that are being created by having a fully remote workforce. And so I think like when you're building your tool or you're building your startup, thinking about how that startup applies to this sort of remote first trend. And, obviously there will be a little bit of a reversion to the mean here, but I think remote work is still largely here to stay. The next is the global job market. So one of the consequences of having these large corporations move almost entirely remote or know that they can operate remote is that it also starts to open up the job or hiring pool to wider geographies, right? So whereas like maybe in the past, you could really just focus on hiring people within certain geographies where you had an office because you wanted those people in the office. Now that we're in this post-COVID remote first work environment, you may not need that anymore, right? So there's probably a higher likelihood of looking to fill certain jobs overseas, right? So maybe you can hire developers in Canada or Eastern Europe or India or the Philippines. And I think that competition for these jobs will continue to be more and more set on a global stage, whereas they maybe used to be set on a local stage. The other big trend that we're facing right now is tightening financial conditions. So I don't want to get too deep down this path, but the Fed funds rate has been rising at the fastest rate that it's almost ever risen, at least since the 70s or the 80s, in order to fight inflation. And so what that means is basically the cost of money is going up, right? Companies are trying to do more with less. And I think there's two ways you can look at that, right? Like you can look at that as a bad thing, or you can look at that as an opportunity. And I think realistically, there's probably a significant opportunity. One of the things that been talking about, one of my family members was a central banker for a long period of time, is what are the implications of this on the labor force, right? Like these tightening financial conditions, the global job market in this remote first world. And I think one of the things that at least I think is going to happen is you're going to see a large increase in the amount of workers that are contract or consulting basis, particularly here in the US. And I think mostly because there's shared incentives there, right? So because financial conditions are tightening, businesses are trying to save money where they can. A large part, at least especially for tech companies, of that is based on, headcount. I think like hiring contract workers tends to be cheaper. And then on the employee side, let's say you're doing a lot of contracting or consulting, it's actually more tax efficient, right? Because you're running your own business. And now obviously there are some issues there left to be worked out, but I think like thinking about this in a very aggressive way, like how can you capitalize on these tightening financial conditions rather than thinking about, oh man, like this is so bad, really looking for the opportunity in that, I think is key. I also think the good thing about tightening financial conditions is it means that a lot of these bigger companies are going to be spending less and less money trying to compete with like every startup that comes up. They're just not going to have the money to invest in different initiatives that aren't their core product. So I think it opens up the opportunity for startups to like really gain a lot of ground against bigger players in the space, because those bigger players are consolidating their workforce, they're consolidating their focus, and they're less likely to build competing products as they see them come up in the startup ecosystem, which in the past was not the case, right? There's a lot of tools that these bigger companies could just reverse engineer and build really fast and crush competitors out of the space. I think that is like one of the benefits of having tighter financial conditions as a startup. The other thing is rapidly evolving consumer lifestyles, right? So this remote first thing, again, like I really think that people are underestimating the impact of it. on just how people live, right? Think about how much time you spend at home now versus when the pandemic started. Think about how many businesses have been started as a result of the fact that people are spending more time online. I don't have the stats in this chart here, but I did some research, and in 2020 and 2021, there was almost 10 million business starts in the US, which is close to double the previous 4 years. So you saw this huge spike in the amount of people that were starting their own business. And I think that is in large part due to changing lifestyles. If people are working remote from home, they're getting their work done faster, they have more time to build their own startup or side hustle. So I see that trend continuing to accelerate, right? I don't think we're going to go back to a world where, there's going to be less and less startups in the space. Like, I think technology is enabling people to be their own boss more and more, and that trend's going to continue to accelerate over time. I also think too, this to kind of cap this off, is we're seeing the most dramatic change in the economy since the advent of the digital age. Again, in large part due to this remote shift, but we also have these other things that are happening, right? Like we have like different AI tools like ChatGPT and like all these other things that are coming onto the scene that are going to increase the acceleration in change within the economy. And so I think the more that you can embrace that change and look for ways to capitalize on it, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to thrive as a startup in the post-COVID age. So I set the table there for all the things that we're going through, but so how can you capitalize on some of these things? So the first thing is, I would say, like leveraging tools like Upwork and Fiverr to outsource laborious tasks. I think, when you're creating your own startup, one of the things that you don't realize is that your time is your most valuable resource. And, whether it be trying to get 500 emails, or maybe there's certain aspects of your website that you need fixed, or maybe you just don't know how to do something. Like maybe you don't understand how to set up Google Analytics, or you don't know how to run cold email campaigns. You can actually find people on Upwork that know how to do a lot of the stuff, and they can teach you. So they can do two things. They can do it for you, and then they can teach you how to do it. And so I think like really looking at these two things as a major resource is so important, especially when we're in this remote first world. Sure, you can Google things, you can YouTube things, you can learn to do things on your own, but that all takes time. And if you can find someone on Upwork that's based either in the US or overseas that can do it 10 times faster than you can, great. You just saved yourself 10x. So definitely make sure to like use those two resources because they are major game-changing resources. The other thing is hire talent globally. So don't just look like immediately within your geography. I know we mentioned that a couple people are calling in from a whole bunch of different places. Take advantage of the fact that we are in a global economy and hire people globally. One of the other trends in terms of this like financial tightening that I was talking about earlier is the US dollar is incredibly strong, right? And so what that means is if you're hiring people overseas, your money actually goes further. And so I think like continuing to look at things like the strengthening dollar and look at maybe different countries that you can hire in where your money goes further is really a win-win for everyone, right? So I really think being aggressive of finding that global workforce is going to be really important. And then the other thing is be smart with your capital because the cost of money has risen dramatically. So I was saying before, the Fed funds rate's increasing at the fastest pace it has since the 70s and the 80s. Just to put things in perspective, the Fed funds rate was close to 0% basically for all of 2020 and 2021. Once the pandemic started, it was dropped to 0%. But even before, from 2008 to about 2016, the Fed funds rate was pretty much stuck at 0%. It's now close to 4%. So we went from 0% Fed funds rate, which is the cost that the amount of interest banks have to pay when they're borrowing from the Federal Reserve or from the Treasury, now to 4%. So that's 400 or 4,000% increase in the cost of money. So be smart with your capital, use it and deploy it carefully because it's more expensive than it has been. The other thing I'd say is meet people where they are and evolve your business around the changing landscape. So it's easy to look at those changes that I laid out above and curl up in a ball and be like, holy shit, this is really scary, right? But the truth is like change equals opportunity. Every single one of those bullet points that I mentioned earlier, there is a way to capitalize on one of those trends. And so when you're building your business, you want to look at ways that you can do that. Like when there's periods of dramatic change, that's actually when there's the biggest amount of opportunity as a startup to capitalize on those. These big companies, these big businesses, they're like ocean tankers, right? For them to turn takes an incredible amount of effort, takes a lot of time. And so the advantage that startups have is they can move rapidly, right? So use that to your advantage. This changing landscape is an advantage for startups because you can move faster than anyone else. So keep that in mind. The last thing I'll say is use SaaS tools to make your team more efficient. Again, going back to the remote thing, and I know I've talked about this a gazillion times already, but SaaS is going to become more and more important because of the remote first environment, right? It's also a cost saving tool. So if there's services that you were previously doing manually with employees that you can now do with SaaS, that's a massive cost savings. So those two things, the fact that you're remote first and the fact that you can save money by switching to using SaaS, are amazing cost savings. So there's tons of things you can do here, right? Like you can look at service-based businesses currently that, their largest piece of overhead right now is the service that they're providing because they're using a lot of manual labor, a lot of people. Maybe there's a lot of no-code tools that you can build to arb out, the cost that they're paying for performing that service versus you, and you can beat a lot of people out on price here. So I think that's another key point. Okay, so how to save. So how do you save money in this post-COVID age? So I just listed out a few things here. And Art, once we're done here, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff. But the first thing is talk to as many potential customers as possible about your idea before you build. And I have some tools that I recommend here for this. So I recommend Hunter or Apollo if you're trying to do something like this, where you can find like large lists of certain types of clients that you might have. But I would say the biggest mistake, and I talk to a lot of startups all the time, is that they build something that they think is solving a problem without talking to enough customers about the problem that they're solving. So like I see a lot of people start here, right? They build their MVP with no code tools and then they talk to as many customers as possible. You should start here. Start with talking to your customers first. And I know for people that are introverted and like to build stuff like web apps and stuff like that through no code tools, like this part's probably not that fun. But I guarantee you, if you rather than talking to 2 or 3 potential customers before you build, you talk to 15, 20, 100, your idea, your tool is going to be much better. Your MVP is going to have a much better chance of actually succeeding. And so I recommend using tools like Hunter.io or Apollo. You can basically get huge lists of, if you're going after restaurants, maybe you're building a restaurant SaaS no-code tool, or maybe you're building a tool that focuses on education and you want a list of all the different education companies that are, within the US or within your country. You can find all of that on Apollo or on Hunter, and then you can build custom drip email campaigns, and you can send hundreds of emails a day to actually talk to the customers that you want to talk. So I would say those 2 tools, super important. The next, and obviously this is probably the one that resonates the most with the no-code crowd, but build your MVP using no-code and talk to as many customers as possible about your MVP. There's great tools out there like Bubble, Glide, EditorX. There's tons and tons of no-code tools out there that will enable you to build an app super cheap to create your MVP. And MVP, for those that don't know, that stands for minimum viable product. So don't waste too much time building extra features, doing extra things. Just build a tool that solves the problem you're setting out to solve in the simplest way possible. And that's the next thing that I'll get to, which is try to prove your business model in the simplest way possible. Or as I like to say, KISS, right? Keep it super simple. And I have some tools here that I think help with that, like Hotjar and Google Analytics. You can really focus on making sure that people are doing the things that you want them to do. But this is another huge mistake that I see a lot of startup founders make, is they spend all their time up here building extra features, building extra things that maybe are needed, maybe not, to actually get customers to do what they need them to do. And it's a huge mistake. The faster you talk to customers, the faster you build your MVP, the faster you get it into your customers' hands, the faster you can get feedback and actually make sure that your tool is doing the thing that it's supposed to do. So these might sound like more general startup advice, but you save money by doing all these things correctly. Because again, if you don't do it right the first time and you have to go back and do it again a second time or a third time, or let's say you quit because you didn't talk to the right customers and you didn't build the right tool, well, you just wasted a ton of money, way more money than you would have spent by just doing it right the first time. So I think that's important. Again, leverage tools like Fiverr and Upwork to get those tedious tasks done. So if part of your product requires like some web scraping, there's a lot of tools you can use for that kind of stuff, but sometimes the data quality isn't great. So you need to get someone to clean up some of that data, use Upwork, use Fiverr, get them to do it. Don't be the one sitting there spending 5 hours on a Thursday night, especially if you're side hustling, trying to clean up emails. It's not a good use of your time. Your time is finite. Use it efficiently, spend money so that you don't have to spend time doing things you don't want to do. And it'll be less money than you think. Trust me. Some tasks on Fiverr are a lot cheaper than you might have initially thought. The other thing is work fast, right? Because time is money. Again, the faster you move, the lower your overhead is. If your time is valuable, the faster you can perform a task, the more efficient you are at performing a task, the more money. So I like to recommend using tools like Monday.com or Notion just to schedule your day, or make sure that your team is on task if you're using outsourced teams or if you have a team of your own. But the more efficient and the faster you work, the more money you actually save. So I can't recommend that enough. The last thing that I'll say before I talk about loot is don't create false economies. I've seen this happen quite a bit, where basically what I mean by false economies is you create shortcuts for doing things that are incredibly important to your business, and they wind up costing you more time and money later. Let's say, for instance, like you just build like a really big expansive app. You're doing something wrong the whole time, and you're going to have to go back and fix it later, but you keep doing it and doing it because you're saving money, and you're putting off like hiring that expert or hiring that person that can just fix it for you and make it right. That's creating a false economy for yourself, because if you hire that person, even if it's a little bit more than you want to spend, and they do it right and your business hits the way it should, then guess what? That's an incredibly efficient investment. So don't create those false economies. Like, the market is incredibly efficient at pricing the cost that it is to do something, because it has to be efficient. And if you're trying to do little tricks or little tweaks all the time to try and arb out like what you think are inefficiencies within pricing in the market, whether it be with labor or software or whatever else, it's going to be hard for you to win, because prices are set by the market, right? And so it's pretty rare for you to find a market inefficiency that you can exploit to save money on tasks. But I would recommend tools like Pilot or Bonsai. These tools are really great if you're an early startup founder, to just get control of your finances and really start planning out some of your spending. So you just have a better view of what you're paying out for and how much money you're spending without having to go to a CPA or something. They do a lot of it automated. A lot of it's integrated within your software. And so if you're using some of these no-code tools, you can integrate like Pilot or Bonsai into those, and you can automate a lot of your finances. So you always have a good view of your finances. And of course, the last thing is use Loot to save on SaaS. So again, what is Loot? Loot gets you discounts and cash back on all your favorite SaaS tools, and you can save thousands of dollars. So we have monthly cashback payments. Like with Webflow right now, we have 50% cash back for the first year. So every month you're signed up for Webflow, you're getting 50% cash back. We have similar deals with Bubble and a lot of other no-code tools that we run deals with through No-Code Devs. Take advantage of that. That's like a super easy way to save money, right? If you can cut your no-code tool expenses in half, you should be doing that. You should definitely be doing that. So again, we do monthly cashback payments. We have a deal directory. We have a browser extension. Go sign up. Go check it out. Go to www.savewithloot.com/no-code-devs to sign up. Let us know once you've signed up and you make a purchase. Let's say you buy Webflow or Bubble or Glide or one of these apps. Let us know. We'll get you that $50 Amazon gift card. Yeah, that's the long and short of it. I know I blabbed there for a while, but yeah.
No, that was perfect, and that was awesome. There were, maybe if you could actually bring that slide back up. I think it was like one slide back. There were a couple really good points on there that I see a lot in the no-code community. The one that I can speak to right off the top of my head, though, is the sort of the trap that people fall into a lot, which is building something without talking to anybody or their audience or both, right? Going out there and just like getting excited about some no-code tool, which a lot of people do. There's a lot of new tools popping up in this space, so there's a lot of excitement about these tools. So what you see way too many times is people going out there and building this like app that's amazing, that's going to change the world, or this website or this concept, or even just this landing page, and then they share it and it's like crickets, because they didn't actually find product market fit. And of course, it's not always going to come instantly, but they didn't even talk to anyone to get anybody's feedback to know that, yeah, maybe there's some flaws in their idea. And maybe it's just like a small iteration or a small tweak that will make that idea click. But if you don't talk to anybody, you're never going to know. It's easy to do. Listen, I do it all the time. I make changes to things within No Code Devs without actually talking to the community. And as a result, most of the time it backfires because, or at least isn't as good as it could be. So I think that's really important, especially in the no code space, especially with all the tools that are out there. And, these tools can be expensive, which is why you need a service like Loot, is because, software, it does make you more productive. It does make you more efficient. It does connect with your team, but it does add cost. So make sure that you're using every available resource like Loot to bring down those software costs, because it does pile up. If you don't have, a lot of people costs, maybe if you're a smaller startup, you're probably gonna have more software costs because you're using a lot of software to do things that, human resources might typically do. So I think these were all really good points. And I love the idea about, leveraging tools like Fiverr or Upwork or whatever they may be to free up your time from, automatic and routine tasks. Expanding into the no code space, I would just include something like Zapier, which is something that I use a lot, but making sure that you're not, spending your time doing busy work when you really need to spend that core time on deep work or, sales or, just working on your core product. So make sure you don't get too into weeds, because it's really easy to do, to try to do everything, especially if you're like a solo founder or a young startup. So I think that's all super, super important.
Like the perfect example is let's say you're doing data, you're spending 2 or 3 hours fixing data for some kind of scraping that you've been doing.
Yeah.
And you're using that 3 or 4 hours instead of talking to potential customers, or building new features on your no code tool. The more that you can think about, okay, what are the things that only I can do, that I need to focus on, and then sort of trying to outsource or find people to do those other things at a lower cost, the more efficient you're going to be able to be, and the more you're going to be able to better serve your customers. You want to spend a lot of time talking to your customers, a lot of time learning more about what they want, what they need, versus doing some of this more manual stuff, especially early on.
Yeah, especially early on. And you have to remind yourself, you can't just write that in a slate once and, it'll always be a thing. You have to remind yourself to do that every day, because it's really easy to fall into the trap of doing everything. For sure, I struggle with this as well. So I think most people do. So it's just really important to always be on the lookout for, people or tools that can help you work more efficiently. And like I said, it does tend to add up from time to time. So make sure you're, being as resourceful as you can in finding deals or finding, people that are able to, solve your problems, at a reduced cost. So I think that's super important. We actually throughout that, there are some people that came in out. I don't know if there were any questions. If there are, maybe just throw them in the chat and we can answer them. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll follow up in a day or two once we edit this video. We'll email it out to everyone, and we'll make sure that there's instructions there, how to sign up, how to access these deals. And then if you do, purchase a deal off the heels of this webinar, you'll be able to get that Amazon gift card that Dexter referred to at the beginning. Yeah. But if there's nothing else, I really appreciate, you doing this and, talking about Loot. And I guess what's the best way, if somebody, has an additional question or just wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah. So you can email me at dexter@loot.discount. So I can actually throw that in the chat real quick. But just feel free to email me if you have any questions. Definitely sign up if there's any tools that you're looking to buy right now. Getting that extra $50 Amazon gift card before the holidays, always helpful. So yeah.
And of course, if you have any, I know a lot of people join these webinars just for the no code aspect of it. So if you have any questions about what software, before you even get to purchasing the software, but what software might be best appropriate for your use case, I can help with that. Hit me up at No Code Devs or on Twitter, and we can help you, with that first step, because a lot of times that's what we see is, okay, I have this idea, but I don't even know really what software to use. So we can point you to that software, and then hopefully Loot they have most of them. So hopefully Loot can help you save some money once you pick that software.
And if there's some that we're missing, let us know and we'll go get them. So
perfect. Yeah, they've been great. And just in my experience in a little bit of time that we've been working with you guys, I've seen a ton of new software added, and it seems like it's like expanding every day, along with the features that you offer to find those tools is getting better and better. Definitely, keep an eye on you guys, because there's just like a ton of resources available for founders and startups and anyone using software.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Art. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. See ya.
Yep. See ya.